Welcome to the Irish NFL show as we delve into the second day of free agent frenzy. We deals aplenty on the wild first day, really, of legal tampering as NFL teams competed for the affection of free agents across the league. So we're back, myself, Colin, Brian and Kieran. Kieran, welcome aboard to reflect on the deals that have taken place since we wrapped our live show last night just after 10 o'clock. A couple of big moves on day one, just to recap, and we will go back over some of those and the impact thereof now that we've had a chance to reflect. And also, Colin, you had a good chat with Bill Barnwell yesterday, and that's available wherever you get your podcasts. A really good conversation with Bill Barnwell from ESPN, who was thoughtful and considered and had plenty of stats to back up his points as he always does. I'd say he was a great school debater, Bill Barnwell, never short of a stat to throw in there to back up his argument. But one of the things that Barnwell was talking about is what looks like a massive money deal on day one. When you actually delve into the detail and when you get past what the agents told the NFL insider to report, it often you get a bit more clarity. Baker Mayfield deal probably being a classic example there. Reported as a $100 million deal. It's actually only really a $40 million deal with a lot of options and other incentives and things built in. So good job the agents on day one, as is always the case. But we'll reflect on some of those bigger moves, including Kirk Cousins, of course, signing with the Falcons, Saquon moving from the Giants to the Philadelphia Eagles. Sorry, lads. God rest him. And Dolphins offensive lineman Robert Hunt signing a $100 million contract with the Panthers. That's a record for a guard. Whatever way you carve up the way that one was reported, it's big money for a player in that position. More deals happening today, of course. Running back still on the move all over the place. We've got a couple of interesting moves in the backup quarterback market among the free agency contracts as well. First, let's look at some of the big signings, though, that were completed late last night, Irish time. Brian Burns traded to the Giants, Brian. New York sent a second round and a fifth round pick to Carolina for him. Big contract for him. There's a lot to delve into here. Obviously, the Giants needed to do something big, and that was just tonic after seeing Xavier McKinney and the aforementioned Saquon heading out the door. We'll get to the Carolina Panthers side of the equation soon, and that's nearly even more fascinating considering what they've been doing over the last year or two. Like they've been fleeced more often than the New Zealand sheep farmer at this stage. But talk to us about the Giants side of that deal. Player they needed and looks like the right money.
Yeah, and another thing I actually didn't pick up the time last night was the fifth round. There's actually next year's fifth round. They swap picks in the fifth round, but they've given away the 2025 fifth, which makes it even sound more valuable in terms of the deal in which they got. I mean, it's been quite evident. You haven't met a number of beat writers over the course last week. The Giants were going to make a serious push for an edge rusher. They look like Hunter from the Vikings was suggesting as potentially one they go after. So it does make sense. Whilst we're slightly concerned on the offensive side of things, I think it does whet the appetite to have Thibodeau, who came on in leaps and bounds in the second half of the season, Dexter in the middle, and to have a proper edge rusher, in Brian Burns there to come in. It does kind of whet the appetite for what to me looks like Joe Shane has evaluated over the last couple of months, is that we're going to try to build this team through the trenches, because two of the offensive line guys that were picked up yesterday haven't missed a game in 2 years. You've got Brian Burns has only missed 2 games. 2 games over the course of the last 2 years, and running back in Singletary, I think he's only missed 1 game. So he's recognised these players are durable at a good price, but obviously the Brian Burns one is going to catch the eye. And I'm more interested to hear what the take is from the Panthers, because I listened to a couple of Panthers pieces today, and they just don't get it anymore. They seem to have given up the ghost in terms of what this organisation is trying to do, because it's not too long ago that and you might get into the devil of the detail, Connor, in terms of what was suggested as the offer from the Rams, and I suppose to refuse that. And then by all accounts, there was also an offer on the trade deadline day last October, Halloween, and they didn't take that. And here we are in March and they're taking a deal. It just doesn't make any sense. But for the Giants, I think kind of rubber stamps what a lot of people felt which was going to be the priority, which was a pass rusher.
Kieran, let's look at the Panther side of the equation here, though, and Brian's kind of raised some of the interesting points here. And you kind of got to rewind the clock here, really, to the beginning of last year. So Dan Fitterer, since sent on his way by Tepper, the GM at the time, gets absolutely rinsed in a trade with the Bears. They end up sending DJ Moore to Chicago and what turns out to be the number 1 overall pick this year. They trade up and get Bryce Young. That doesn't work out. Coach is fired. Big clear out. But it seems they're up to their old tricks again. Well, sorry, this one goes back, to be fair, to what they turned down under Fitterer, which was a massive offer on the table from the Rams, we believe, for Burns. They've now settled for a lot less than they could have got.
Yeah, the Panthers are they're a team, they're a franchise, they're an organization, a lot of flux right now. When I was at the Jags Panthers game on New Year's Day, and I got to speak with a couple of beat writers, and especially in the press conference afterwards. A lot of despondency, a lot of scratching their heads. This was after their second consecutive shutout, and there was a lot of I spoke to one particular person who was just confused with what's going on. They had the interim head coach at the time, and there was confusion about the direction of the team. And this is when they still had Brian Burns. The move to get rid of Burns, I mean, the Panthers are not really going anywhere. I think we can all agree they did sign two guards today, or in the last day or two, Damian Lewis and Hunt for the $100 million. Chase Young got ragdolled in that Jaguars game, as he did most of last season. There's no way that they're gonna go through another season with that type of line like they had before. I think they're on the outs with Bryce Young. They're going to give him one more year just to see if he can stay upright, if he can do anything. Where's his weapons? That's a great question. Adam Thielen is still on the roster, I believe, and that's about it from what I can see. They did pick up Ashawn Robinson today. That's a good pickup, but they need everywhere across the line. And similar to last season, especially towards the tail end of last season, there was a dearth of skill players. Even if Bryce Young had the time to release the ball, there wasn't anybody else other than Adam Thielen in the slot. The run game was non-existent. He was just getting sacked after sack. He's not a big fella. I mean, in the press conference, he's not he's not a large guy, and he's about 600. I mean, about 6 foot. I don't think he's even 200 pounds. So, and with that frame, getting knocked around, it's going to be another lost season for Carolina. They're not going anywhere in that division, especially with the moves that have gone on in the NFC South. A good pickup for the Giants. They definitely weren't paying McKinney. I still think that the ATV accident kind of sealed his fate, but that's another conversation for later on. But Panthers are, it's a head scratcher all over Carolina.
And you look as well, Colin, like the players have gone out the door in Carolina. Baker has a perfectly good redemption story last year when he winds up in Tampa Bay. DJ Moore obviously had a brilliant season for the Bears. When you had a piece like Brian Burns that potentially had significant trade value, there was a time to maximize that when you needed the capital most to rebuild a roster, and they botched it. And sometimes it's the moves you don't do that come back to haunt you.
Yeah, I imagine good old George Payton in Denver is absolutely delighted because the Panthers, he's a man who has an incredible ability to make decisions at the wrong time and minimize the trade value. But the Panthers have absolutely outdone themselves every single trade they seem to make. Imagine getting rid of Christian McCaffrey and Brian Burns and not netting yourself a first round pick. Truly incredible. And to me, Connor, the talking point, it has to be David Tepper's ownership. I mean, we have not seen something like this since Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace and had no idea what to do with it. This is the kid who got what he wanted and is absolutely lost. And I think for all the other owners in the league, in some ways they're probably delighted because it takes the gloss off of them. But we know that this, and I will be fascinated to talk to Peter King about this in a couple of weeks, because Peter has very outspoken on Dan Schneider and the way in which the owners kind of close ranks to protect Schneider. Well, we're into the new Dan Schneider era in the league, and it's the poor old Panthers. Look, this is a team that realistically should have, after Cam Newton went or was let go, they should have gone into a full rebuild. They never embraced it, and I still, I guess they're making moves on the line to try and keep Bryce Young upright.
And Colin, it's not like you're in, and you deal with this every day. You're in the AFC West where you got frickin' the Chiefs to deal with. You're in the NFC South. Like, any sort of reasonable level of competency puts you at the table to get to the playoffs.
Yeah, but they haven't had it, and I still don't know. I mean, Kieran has pointed out, like, where are the weapons? At least they're doing something, you would have to say, to shore up the line. but the reality is they drafted a QB at 1 who is almost historically small. I mean, there are small QBs, and that takes away the middle of the field. But we're talking about a guy in terms of height, in terms of size, who struggled, and especially when you don't have the weapons to put around him, it becomes increasingly difficult. So, I mean, the problem for them is, even if they tank this season, well, at least they'll have their pick. But do you trust David Tepper to get this right? I mean, how much faith do you have? They went in terms of the head coach. I think he is a good play caller, but it's a young guy who, I mean, ultimately, is Tepper, how much control is Tepper willing to give? Are we going to see Tepper be impetuous? Let's go back. It needs to be said, David Tepper, when he was profiled, his favorite story to tell was about how he bought, he was denied promotion. He bought the guy's house and he demolished it because he wanted to prove a point. And he thinks that's a great story to tell. And he thinks that's a good story in terms of how it looks on him. You got a feel for the Panthers. You really do.
Look,
Connor,
there's Giants and Broncos fans in a room. We can talk about an even more dysfunctional franchise all day long. Go on, Brian.
No, I think what's played out over the last 6 weeks is very much probably how we summed it up towards the end of the season. We felt that they probably needed a strong-minded head coach to go in there, but who realistically would want to touch it and go and work with Dave Tepper. But it would end up being inevitably being a new head coach who's coming from a position such as an offensive coordinator, and Dave Canellis essentially is that kind of man. He's obviously, he's shooting up the ranks over the course of last year. Like, a lot of people wouldn't have known who he was last year before he became the offense coordinator with the Bucs, having come in from Seattle, and then obviously he's in a head coach position. Maybe the benefit for him is he's remaining within the division, and he'll have a good understanding of the teams in the division. But again,
the benefit for him is when he's getting paid $10 million a year to sit on the beach. We all know that's where this one is headed based on previous form.
Yeah, but you got to call out to that. Sometimes you can't keep firing head coaches every season and in the middle of the season. What's this, 2 years in a row they've done that with Frank Reich? Obviously this year again. I mean, at some stage you got to give him a little bit of breathing space. But
fired the coach of his Major League Soccer team as well. Anyway, look, let's move on. We can talk about this all day, but there's so many other deals to discuss. A couple of interesting QB moves. I know we're talking backups now, but it's clearly an important position. We look at how many backup quarterbacks were on the field at one stage last season, a record number of number 2 signal callers in action. Tyrod Taylor gone to the Jets to back up Aaron Rodgers. Kieran, that's good to see Tyrod getting another shot, but he's better than Zach Wilson.
I think we can all agree he is better than Zach Wilson. Tyrod was serviceable with the Giants. He had that little, competition with Mr. DeVito, but it's a good pickup for the Jets. I mean, he's a solid pro. He, he's, I wouldn't say he's durable, but he's serviceable. I mean, if Rodgers goes down again for any kind of time, a couple of weeks, the Jets, they'll be able to tread water with Tyrod Taylor. He's got good mobility. I'll give him that. It's definitely a big upgrade for the Jets. I mean, they got so burned last year, from keeping Zach Wilson and not doing anything, that they had to make some sort of a move. So decent move for the Jets. They picked up a couple of other pieces, but in the realm of backup quarterbacks, it's not exciting, but it's definitely an upgrade on Mr. Wilson.
Speaking of not exciting, Sam Darnold gone to Minnesota, Brian.
But this one has a legitimate shot at being the quarterback, though, in fairness. And we're calling him a backup, and we're putting him into the pool of backups. But by all accounts, Kevin O'Connell has a love in for him.
He's going to be Justin Fields' backup. Were you not listening to Bill Barnwell yesterday?
Yeah. Again, I'm not convinced by that one, because by all accounts today the Eagles are going to throw a flyer into the mix to get Justin Fields on a late round pick as well, and have him in as a ready-made replacement should they have to move on from Jalen Hurts during the season if he was to get injured. That's the latest conversation going around. But I think Sam Darnold may have a legitimate chance to be this next Baker Mayfield. Like, this what we saw this time last year. We were suggesting Baker would be nothing more than a backup going in there, and even there was a conversation whether he'd even win the position in Tampa. That was very evident early on that he was. But maybe Sam Darnold is this guy that can right the wrongs of his career and get another opportunity with the Vikings. $10 million for a 1-year contract. be interesting to see what the Vikings do come the draft. They're selecting at 11. Will they try and move up, or will they sit tight and see if something falls to them? But again, we've seen teams do that. Look at Mac Jones. He fell nicely into the Patriots' lap at 15, and 3 years later, he's now a backup quarterback in Jacksonville. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in Minnesota. I'm not convinced he will be the number one, but I certainly think he'll get a fair crack at it.
Colin Owen saying in the comments there, he's still waiting on the Niners to make a splash, which hasn't happened quite yet. But it's interesting that one of the things we have seen the Niners do is clean house a little bit in the trenches. Eric Armstead, obviously, they couldn't come to agreement with. He's gone. And now Javon Kinlaw signing with the Jets on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose given the stars that they have on that team and what they're trying to do, you're going to have to make tough decisions at times. But this is what good football teams have to do. The Chiefs are the ultimate example of that, right? Think about the willingness to move on from Tyreek Hill, the fact that they are going to very likely move on from their one of the top cornerbacks. They were able to get the deal done with Chris Jones, and so the 49ers have found themselves in a position where they have to make some tough decisions as well, because they want to continue to be competitive. I'm I suppose a little surprised the Armstead one, that I had assumed that as soon as kind of that would open up, D'Amico Ryans and the Texans, given the amount of money they had and given the relationship that they had, I thought that one would get done. Obviously, you've seen kind of Leonard Floyd go over there. I thought there'd been some speculation that they might be in for Brian Burns, because it's the type of move we have seen the 49ers make previously. They're not shopping in that aisle this year, kind of gone with Floyd instead. But they kind of do, I suppose, take chances on players, and they also do what we have seen, the Eagles and others do in terms of rotating guys in and out. The other piece, I see Chase Young has some kind of visits lined up over the next couple of days. There's a guy obviously entered the league with such a high profile. Somebody will take a flyer, but and even though we saw him, have a better game in the Super Bowl, the playoffs in the lead up to that, like when you're playing for the 49ers and you're playing in a championship game and you're jogging around, oh my goodness.
I just thought with Chase Young, and obviously I would say this, wouldn't I? But like, you saw the difference when they broke up Montez Sweat and Chase Young. You now see how much Chase Young benefited from playing alongside Sweat, because you saw the difference that Sweat made when he went to the Bears. Ryan Poles said he was a force multiplier, and that turned out to exactly be the case. But, subtracting Sweat from the equation meant that on paper, while the Chase Young to the Niners, you thought, wow, that makes a fearsome defense even better. It was subtraction by addition, if I'm not mixing up my mathematical metaphors here. Anyway, we move on, because Kieran Zach Moss, who was probably the big beneficiary of the Jonathan Taylor situation at the Colts last year and had a really nice season for himself, now gone to the Bengals. Joe Mixon, of course, out the door there, which is slightly surprising. Might have thought that they would have looked to hold on to him, but gone to the Texans. That's an intriguing one in both directions for me.
Yeah, the Joe Mixon move. I mean, they had to move, fairly quickly. The running back pool was starting to get a little low, so they had to make a move for somebody soon after Singletary left. Mixon's a great addition. I spoke to Brian earlier on. He was saying that Joe would be a great pickup for the Giants, but 7 years. I mean, he's young, but he's got 7 years on the board already. So that's a lot for running backs, and these guys go off a cliff pretty quickly, and I'm not convinced Mixon's going to have a great couple of years. But it's a good pickup for the Texans. They're battling with the Jaguars in that division. Zach Moss, I like the pickup. It's solid. It's not it's not fireworks, but it's what was needed. Mixon, I like Mixon to do some real good work in that division. But again, it's the dearth of paying running backs right now, and Mixon had to go somewhere, and Houston picked him up.
I like the Texans side of that, though. I mean, it probably looks to fill one real gap that they had, and something that I think really helped Stroud and really helped that offense. I'm intrigued to see how that one works out. But Brian, talked about backup quarterbacks. I can't believe I overlooked Jacoby Brissett back with the Patriots on a 1-year deal.
It stuns me that every offseason people keep suggesting that Jacoby Brissett is every team discussed the nature of the fact that they need a backup or potentially a guy that can come in, challenge and be the quarterback. And then Jacoby Brissett's name gets thrown into the mix. But we've all seen over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, Jacoby will come in and give you 2 or 3 games, but then similar maybe to the conversation we suggested around Gardner Minshew, you play well for 4 or 5 games, but ultimately you're gonna fail, you're gonna fall short. And like this strikes me as we know exactly what the Patriots are doing. They're lining up to take a quarterback at 3 in the draft, and Jacoby Brissett is the nice type of quarterback that you can bring in that will work with a young quarterback and mentor him and put the arm around the shoulder. And potentially, if the quarterback's not ready, he'll play for you and give you a couple of games. But I'm surprised he's gone back there. But again, it's a relatively cheap deal for the Patriots and allows them to kind of focus on what I think ultimately is the big deal here, which is to take the quarterback come April 25th.
Yeah, Brissett is the Catherine Heigl in 27 dress is always the bridesmaid, and that looks set to continue next season as you're outlining, Brian. Look, that's us all really caught up on the main deals that have happened overnight and early this morning. Let's jump in now and maybe look at some of today's signings as we jump into our second segment here. Colm, Patrick Queen, we talked about him yesterday as being one of the better free agents still left on the board. No, linebacker is not necessarily a premium position as we discussed yesterday, but he goes to a divisional rival, leaves the Ravens, joins the Steelers. I think that's quite a nice pickup for them.
I actually think linebacker is becoming a little bit more important in the way in which
if you're Dre Greenlaw or Fred Warner or that type of
yeah, but even if you look at, say, what the Chiefs are doing, and I think with Mike McDonald going to Seattle, and in terms of the conversation with Barnwell, one of the things I asked him was, where does he think that the league is going, and that defensive piece and how defenses are evolving. So I do think it is a piece that we might see more of, just because you do need the smarter guys to be there, and it is the I saw a stat, I mentioned it on that interview as well, like the yards per completion is at its lowest level that has been since the merger. That tells you the way in which defenses are kind of going about things. In terms of this move, it's an interesting one, because this is where we get to see, I suppose, Patrick Queen. Is it obviously that how much has he developed and how much was it Roquan, right? Because it was bringing Roquan in absolutely unlocked Patrick Queen, and those two together were fantastic. But could this be the case that the Steelers don't have a Roquan? They're pretty hard to find. You got Fred Warner, and Roquan are probably the two of the very best. So, but at the same time, Patrick Queen has had a year and a half now. He has developed, and it is one of those positions where perhaps getting guys in their second or third contract can very often, unless you have the absolute best of the best, it can be a benefit. They've had the time to really experience and learn in the league. And a lot of what you're looking at when you guys are drafting linebackers is they're going for traits, they're going for physical attributes, and they're hoping that they can learn. Patrick Queen, incredible athlete, flies about the place. It makes a lot of
if memory serves me, he's the off-ball linebacker with the highest number of sacks as well. Like he gets home.
He does. I mean, it's an interesting one. I suppose the talk today has been around Mike Tomlin and his interaction with Mike Tomlin in his first game against the Steelers, and Tomlin telling him, "You're not a Raven. You're not a Raven." Well, so it proves. It's a nice additional piece in terms of for the Steelers to add to what is a defense that has a lot of names and is very talented. But I don't think it was the defense that the Steelers really have questions about. It is the offense. But I think when you have him, when you have Watt, when you have Minkah, that is a serious defensive unit. We know the division they're in is stacked, and they do go. I mean, the Steelers go to war. That's the way they approach the off season, the preseason, and the regular season. And Patrick Queen will be a nice addition because he'll bring that same attitude.
Gerald Everett signed a 2-year deal with the Bears, Chargers tight end veteran. Interesting in terms of probably what it says about how Shane Waldron's going to go about his business as the offensive coordinator there. Waldron likes to use a lot of multiple tight end sets, big-bodied receivers, also probably a little bit of extra protection for, we expect, the quarterback that they're going to draft with the number 1 overall pick, whether it's Caleb Williams or an other. Bears have had more tight ends than you care to remember over the past couple of seasons. 2 up from the Packers last year, Tunyon and Mercedes Lewis. I don't think there was one decent performance between the both of them for last season. Mercedes Lewis turning 40, so he clearly wasn't going to be a long-term option. Everett definitely an upgrade on what they have available. Hopefully, from a Bears perspective, nice bit of symmetry with Cole Kmet on the other side of the field, who's dominated the receptions as far as tight ends in Chicago are concerned. We'll see how that one works out. Again, it seems very much molded to what Waldron wants to do. They worked with each other when Waldron was with McVay at the Rams, of course, as well. So there's a bit of familiarity too there. Often something that we see crop up in free agency, where guys go with the ones that they know. Kieran, Derrick Henry, 2-year deal with the Ravens. This was, again, one of the ones that we talked about yesterday as maybe being a likely destination. The Ravens will feel, after the way last season ended, well, firstly, they shouldn't have gotten away from the run when it was actually working against the Chiefs, and they'd love to have that one over there. And maybe having a guy like Derrick Henry would have made the difference in that tight spot.
Absolutely. I mean, no one's surprised he ended up at Baltimore. He's a local guy. I mean, I'm in the Jacksonville area. He's a local kid from here. There were a lot of people that I know were, holding out hope that he'd get the hometown discount. I didn't see it happen. And he's got a 2-year deal. And I think we can all agree at 30, he's probably got 2 years left in the league before he hangs it up. It's a natural move for him. He wants a ring. He wants to go out in style. Baltimore, the run game was sorely lacking, even with Gus Edwards. None of us know what happened in the playoffs, but it's a great pickup. It's a great move for Henry. I mean, it sets him up for the perfect position to go out, in a blaze of glory. Great pickup, and not a huge amount of money either, which is interesting.
Brian Austin Eckler gone to the Commanders again on a relatively good value deal by the looks of it, in the $8 to $11 million range over 2 years. That's what we're hearing.
One of the cheapest deals out there for all running backs. I know we've went through the list today. It's quite extensive in terms of how many people moved around. He's quite down the pecking order in terms of the financial remuneration that's come with this move. It's a good pickup for the Commanders. I think he was very much one that teams are always going to be conservative in terms of going for him. Did obviously have a scalability of where he sits on it in terms because of the other players that were available. He's had so many injuries over the course last year. I think his production kind of declined last year. I don't know if that was an impact of Kellen Moore coming in and playing a different type of offense to what suits him. But he was injured quite a lot. He's had a number of different injuries. The Giants were suggested, and I said to Kieran during the week, didn't like the idea of that. I don't see him being able to be so durable to stay available throughout the course of the season. For the Commanders, it probably makes sense. They're trying to build a team with the nature of a team that has, even judged by some of the players in which they brought in again today, a lot of experienced players coming in. Dan Quinn is obviously trying to package a team together that, whilst they might not be flashy on the eye, if you can get durable players in that can last the test of time. I'm not sure whether Eckler falls into that category. Certainly what they've done on defense is reasonably impressive, but ultimately, again, it's about, is he going to be helping this young quarterback? Because the two is the expectations. They're going to select a quarterback and he's going to learn quick and fast because he'd probably be thrown in immediately in September. But it'd be good to have experienced players around him, and Eckler would certainly give them that.
The other thing, Colin, that Dan Quinn is doing is pretty much signing everyone who wore a Cowboys jersey last year and is available as free agency. Dante Fowler joining the party now. He's the latest one, defensive end.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of, they're in very much a rebuild, and they're looking to get bodies in. They're not shopping at the top end. If you look at who they're bringing in, it is obviously, when you go to a new team, a lot of the times you want to bring in guys who know your system, who can kind of get your message across. I expect you're going to see quite a few young players there as well. So it makes sense that he is bringing that in. There hasn't been a wow factor as yet for the Commanders, you would have to say, but I think that's probably okay given where they are at. The wow will be pick two and what because that's probably where there's almost been, if at this point we know the Bears are taking Caleb Williams, but all of it hinges now on the Commanders. Because the talk has been Drake May, but then Drake May is falling. Could it be Daniels? JJ McCarthy is rising. So we will see. That's probably the intriguing piece to see what they might do. But equally, I don't know if you saw that at the combine. Did you say Adam Peters was asked, would they be willing to give up a haul to go up to 1? And he said all things are possible. So who knows? Maybe that is where the splash is for the Commanders.
Well, a thought I had as well on the other side of that column at the combine is that Ryan Poles was very, very happy, the Bears GM, to entertain questions about Caleb Williams and to talk Caleb Williams up. I mean, if you're going to trade the number 1 overall pick, it has greater value if everybody thinks you're going to use the number 1 overall pick on the guy that everybody else wants. He was very deliberately not mentioning any other quarterbacks. I thought, if you're playing rope-a-dope, that's the way you play rope-a-dope. We shall see.
It would be sensational. It is what Peter King suggested they do in one of his final columns.
King said he thought they might trade down twice. That you end up with, basically instant infrastructure, I think was the quote that Peter King used. Over the next 2 years, you could have an unprecedented haul of first round picks. Go do your business.
Can I just make a quick point to the Commanders show and then run into the mix? Cliff Kingsbury is the new offensive coordinator. Cliff Kingsbury, who worked with Caleb Williams only last season as part of his role in the college program. Maybe that's another rationale in the nature of why they would consider moving up, because they've already built a good relationship and they could hit the ground running in terms of Caleb Williams potentially being the Commanders quarterback. I just don't see it. I think the Bears are playing the game very well, but ultimately it's going to be no surprise. It's going to be the nearest thing we've seen to Trevor Lawrence being selected 1 a couple of years back to what we've seen in a while, because it's too big an opportunity for the Bears to move on to a better quarterback and a new beginning for everybody.
If he turns out to be a better quarterback, always big ifs attached to all of that. Kieran, another pickup for the Falcons, got Kirk Cousins in there. Obviously want to add to the wide receiver room around him, and they picked up Darnell Mooney from the Bears. Mooney, who shone actually ironically and was one of the few to do so under Matt Nagy. In fact, there was kind of speculation that Mooney might end up with the Chiefs and building out that wide receiver room. Instead, he finds a new home in Atlanta, and will hope he can get back on track after a fairly indifferent season last year.
Yeah, and Atlanta's now it's now much more attractive, proposition than it was, the last couple of seasons. Raheem Morris is definitely going to have that kind of, that cachet with a lot of, whether it be, free agents or, even draft picks. They have a solid offense. We all know that. Defense is not overly spectacular, but it's definitely a great move for Mooney. I mean, he's going to get the ball. Kirk Cousins, again, we don't want to, overstate the incredible nature of that contract, but it's a great move for him. He gets to play in a dome most of the time. I mean, most of the NFC South is in a dome, or it's in good weather, so he's going to have the option to put up some good numbers. I still don't like Atlanta in the division. I still don't like Atlanta overall. It's a great move for Mooney. I think he'll put up some good numbers, but in that division, that's a separate topic and a separate conversation overall. But Atlanta, I'm not sold on. But it'd be good to see him in a new place.
Kieran gives us NFC South pick away in March.
Oh, listen, I've never been a Falcons fan. I've never liked anything that they've done. I never liked the old Georgia Dome. Listen, that could be another 5-minute conversation.
Brian is going to run it back with the Saints. We know what Brian's going for the NFC South as well.
Derek Carr is there, Connor. Come on, best quarterback in the division.
That division's
very misjudged on that last season. I was. I'll go there.
Can we talk?
I'm sorry. The problem with me down here is I'm stuck with a lot of those NFC South games on a Sunday. If it wasn't for the red zone, I mean, thank God for the red zone. I'd be stuck with Carolina versus New Orleans at 1:00.
Colm, can we talk while we're on the subject of a wide receiver who's gone to the NFC South, to one who left the NFC South and is now a free agent and remains on the board? It's Calvin Ridley. I would have thought we would have seen a move for Calvin Ridley before now. Stats wise, he's one of the best receivers available.
There's a reason I think we haven't seen a movement for Calvin Ridley, and that is because the Calvin Ridley asking price drops dramatically once the new league season starts. The Patriots seem to try to be exerting a little bit of pressure today. I can imagine that the Falcons are going to be none too happy, but hey, business is business. And so I think that once the new league season starts, you will see Calvin Ridley sign a deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the compensation for acquiring him will drop. That is, I think, the holdup. It is going to be an interesting one because the Jags will ultimately then be paying. That's the contract I'm interested to see, because you were talking about them paying Kirk, you're talking about them paying Gabe Davis, you're talking about them paying Calvin Ridley. It's what ultimately is the overall cost of that. But they probably do need to bring Ridley back, because he's the closest thing of those guys to a true number one. But the holdup is the shenanigans that go on when deals have been done, and teams are looking to get the best deal for themselves.
What's the number at the moment, Colin? Is it a second round pick if it's done before 4 o'clock tomorrow,
Yeah.
or third after 4 o'clock tomorrow?
Exactly. 4:01, 9:01 tomorrow evening, I would say we'll get the news on the Calvin Ridley deal.
And I agree with Colin. It's been all over. Obviously, down here, Calvin Ridley's really the only story, and I think the fact that they bulked up with a new contract for Sheriff, the O lineman here, they understood. We had a chat with Brent from the local TV here, and he said the number one priority was getting Ridley back. They can't let him go. This is a real make or break season for Jacksonville. Balky is on the hot seat like nobody's business. Doug Peterson's on the hot seat. This is a big year for him. Trevor Lawrence is a make or break year for him. Ridley is going to be a huge addition to that offense. I'm still not 100% sold on the offense. I think it's overly reliant on ETN, and if he goes down, then it's a real problem. I fully anticipate the Jags bringing Ridley back, and the fact that he's still a free agent at 5:42 local time here is a very telling thing. Like Colin said, I think it's pretty much nailed on. He's going back there. I don't think there's been any noise or any conversation about Ridley with any other team. So it's all but nailed on. He'll be back, and the Jags need him. He needs the Jags. That's the bottom line.
Elsewhere in Florida, Brian, we talked a lot yesterday about the number of players that the Dolphins had to let walk because of the cap issue that they were facing, the extensions they've got to get done. Shaq Barrett has arrived, though, from Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I spoke to a number of Bucs fans recently, once here as opposed to over in Florida, with Kieran, who said his production levels kind of fell off towards the back end of the season. Now, you could argue that the guys had a very difficult personal situation, obviously, with his young child passing away, in dreadful circumstances last year, that he would be given a break. But the NFL is the NFL, and the nature of the situation, he's one of the early cuts by the Bucs. An opportunity for him to go there. Like we touched on it yesterday, there's a lot of Keith even refers to Keith, who's watching the show this evening. He refers to the amount of damage in which the Dolphins have in terms of having to restructure players. Ramsey was restructured today, but it's a nice player. He's going to come in with a point to prove, and they've also lost from Van Ginkel, who left yesterday as well. So there's going to be an opportunity for these guys who are coming in on 1 year prove-it type contracts. And on his day, Colin would know well from his time when he was in Denver. He's obviously quite a while since he's played in that team, but again, on his day, he's still got all the attributes to be a really effective player on the defensive side of the ball. It's whether his head is in the game, and we'll see come September. It's a nice fit. I think the Dolphins will need players like this to come in and look. The Dolphins are going to be under a lot of scrutiny and pressure next year because of the nature of how the season played out. At one stage, we were suggesting they could be number one seed as they go out with a whimper in the AFC wildcard game in Kansas City. So a lot for them to do this season.
Colin, a couple of QB deals I want to mention before we move on. One is, and we were talking about the Commanders earlier, but Marcus Mariota, it's his latest destination now. I was going to say Washington, but we all know it's Landover, Maryland.
The Look, I'm a little surprised in terms of like teams. A lot of are willing to forgive an awful lot in the NFL, but rarely are they willing to forgive downing tools. And this is what Marcus Mariota did, lest we forget. We have seen, and the Steelers' decision to bring Russ in. I wonder if Kenny Pickett regrets, his alleged kind of downing of tools, or not wanting to go back in, or deciding to hold a clipboard on the sideline last year. Marcus Mariota, honestly, if Kieran was to go to SeaWorld, pick up a seal and drive up along the coast and put it, it would be as effective. Honestly, I don't know what Marcus Mariota is for, because he's not a good quarterback. He turns the ball over. He makes terrible decisions, and in a league that is full of those guys. Hello, Drew Lock. Hello, Zach Wilson. Marcus Mariota might be the leading candidate for what am I doing here? What do I do? What am I for?
He might be the most vanilla, most uninteresting player, one of them in the NFL at present. I think we all watched the Netflix show, The Quarterback. I'll be honest, I fast forwarded most of the time he was on. It was unwatchable, unlistenable. Nothing of his life, is interesting. There's been no Baker Mayfield or, any drama stories or any good stuff in there. And like Colin said, he gets another chance, but he's just another one of these, backups that might see a game or two preseason, but hopefully it's not another season like last year. I don't think we're going to see much of him.
I tell you who is not vanilla, Brian, is Jameis Winston. I love to see Jameis Winston getting a shot in Cleveland.
He was suggested as someone the Giants were after today. He was, by all accounts, making the decision. Yeah. Oh, where is he? Crab legs in.
The Browns went to the playoffs by slotting in a player who'll just sling it up there in Joe Flacco. Why wouldn't they think that Jameis could be the guy if Deshaun Watson goes down again?
He'll certainly bring the entertainment to the locker room. Crab legs doing a bit of dancing. He's in there and he can barely walk. Colin knows that story where Sean Payton is during the press conference saying he's in there and the guy can barely walk, and there he is on the crutches dancing.
He's a nightmare. You know what? There's so many. I don't know if you ever heard the story when he was at Florida State, when he suited up and the coach Jimbo Fisher told him he wasn't playing. He still suited up. This is whatever it was, 2012. He did some serious disciplinary stuff in school, and he suited up and he came out on the sideline fully expecting to play. After he was told by the coach he was benched for the whole game, he came out, suit, helmet, all ready to go, and he's at the sideline. Coach is telling him, "What are you doing here? I told you were benched. Bounce." So that's Jameis in a nutshell. Jameis is, but that he's not Marcus Mariota. He's a character, and we're talking about him a lot more than Mariota, which says a lot.
There was a couple of moments last year, Connor. One I can't recall which. Well, the final game of the season, obviously, with Arthur Smith, coming over and having a real disgruntlement about the fact that they ran in a touchdown when, by all accounts, a knee was called into his ear in terms of the helmet, because James Winston was in at that stage. And again, he said, I'll ignore that. We'll run in a touchdown. But he's going to bring an entertainment value there. And ultimately, let's not forget, is anybody really sold on what we've seen out of Deshaun Watson over the last year? He's been injured. Even when he played, he hasn't played at the level in which the nature of a $280 million contract suggests. And is it against?
I'm trying to remember, wasn't it Jameis who had the advanced the analytics, or the advanced stats predicted the most likely, depending on which way you look at it, either the most unlikely touchdown pass or the most likely interception that actually ended up being a reception. He throws beautiful interceptions, just like Flacco. He really knows how to make it fun. I love James.
He's the gunslinger. That's what they're going to get out of him, and he may be the guy that'll have to bring him in. Obviously, Joe Flacco's going to move on now, but it makes sense. Okay, it makes sense. It would all, it's the kind of play I can see why it's an attractive proposition with Mari Cooper and obviously Jerry Jeudy gone in there, and they're going to have players that can get hold of the ball, and he'll get his opportunity. But whether he wins out is another thing. Certainly, think he's durable to bring in for a game or two. But still concerns me when he was brought in a quarterback, for example, with the Saints last year, with an 18-point lead in Green Bay. He managed to cock it all up and they lost the game. Yeah, so he has many flaws, much as he has good moments in games.
Right, with that, let us move on to the third segment of our live show on day 2 of the NFL free agent tampering period. Colin, we wanted to talk about winners and losers. I think I might go first, actually, because I could only think of one idea for winners in free agency, so I'm going to cheat and go first. To me, winners, it's got to be running backs first. All in general, a lot of disgruntlement over recent years, but the unprecedentedly high salary cap has finally delivered a victory for the hard pressed running backs of the world. I mean, again, leaning on what Bill Barnwell was doing in his analysis. Really good article on ESPN today. I thought he broke it down quite well. If you compare the sort of deals that were being done at the peak of, running back lunacy, if you like, when Adrian Peterson got that massive extension from the Vikings, and really there's been no return ever to that. You were talking about 11-12% of the salary cap going on a running back, which was clearly nuts. Barnwell was looking at some of the deals, and whether it's DeAndre Swift or Saquon or any of what looked like the frothier deals at the upper end of the running back market, you're still only looking at maximum 4.2% of the salary cap, which is not an unhealthy amount to have tied up in that particular position relative to what you can spend on the rest of your roster. So it is like, while the headline numbers, the nominal figures are actually quite high, it doesn't necessarily break the bank if you think you got the right guy, but it's a win for running backs anyway, because they've at least captured a little bit more of the pie than was available to them before this season. And look, it's a brutal position, as Kieran was saying earlier. Guys come off a cliff fairly quickly once they hit 26, 27. You can count on the fingers of maybe 1.5 hands the number of running backs who get their extension and actually deliver anything like the production that you would have hoped for based on what they did in the early parts of their careers. We shall see how that one pans out, but I'm going to put them down as a winner first up. Brian, I'll come to you next. Who are your winners from free agency?
Playing position or team, or is it just
playing position, team, fans, mascot, wherever you want to go? The world is your clan.
I'll go with the Jags. I think Gabe Davis is a great signing. I think he was kind of lived in the shadow of Stephon Diggs over the last couple of years. I think it's a worthy contract for a player that I believe can step up to be number one. And to get Ridley back, having done the piece with Kieran last week in terms of the local Jags radio station, they were calling out last week 2 key position was the offensive line. Well, they brought in a really strong center, and if they get Ridley back tomorrow, I think they've put themselves in a position to have a bounce back season next year. So it's not because Kieran's on, he lives close to the area. They're a team that I thought would go out. It was clearly called out last week. Ward receiver was a clear need. Gabe Davis for me is a big pickup.
You see that as a win as well, Kieran? I'd be interested in your take on Gabe.
Gabe to the Jags, yeah. Well, there's a couple of things in play. I mean, I don't think the deal had to be sold that well. He's a local kid. He's from Fernandina Beach. He went to school at UCF. He knows the area very well. He did a lot of good stuff with the Bills. Sometimes players want to come home, and I think he looked around. He saw, Trevor Lawrence, decent quarterback. Doug Peterson, good head coach. I thought it makes sense for Gabe Davis, and it makes sense for the Jags. It's a great pickup. I think there was a little bit of let's do this just in case the Calvin Ridley stuff goes south. Make sure we got our behind covered, because there is a bit of a fall off with wide receivers in Jacksonville. But I think he'll do good. I mean, we've all seen him in the playoffs, perform, and that's where the Jags need to be. They're going to need somebody making some big plays when it's January and possibly even February. For me, well, talking about winners, it pains me to say this, but Saquon for me is the big winner out of this. I mean, he did everything and said everything that Giants fans wanted to hear up until yesterday, and for him, I mean, he's got the move where he's going to be given every opportunity to shine. I mean, there was a comparison of the O-line with the Giants last year to the Eagles O-line last year, and it's 1-31, in ranking. So I mean, he's going to get every chance to excel. I'm not as bitter as a lot of other Giants fans are. I was resigned to losing him. Nobody had the Eagles on the bingo card, but I think Saquon with the deal that he got, which is not really that far from what the Giants were probably going to give him if it all came down to it. But he got paid. He got to go to a contender, a real big contender, and the Giants won out of that too because they weren't bringing him back. That's not the direction they're going. So it's, as much as it pains me to say, good for Saquon.
I saw that O-line comparison as well, by the way, Kieran. I thought it was striking. And I think off the top of my head, the expected yards per rush for a Giants back out last year was something like 3.5 versus 4.7 for the Eagles. Like, you're literally getting 25% more yardage per carry based on how good that O-line was. O-line, of course, which won't have Jason Kelce next year, which will be a significant factor, and we'll see how the tush push goes without probably the most important part of the whole process.
It'll give Saquon a chance to compete in the big games. One playoff season and all the time he was there. In 22, when the Giants made the playoffs, he was starting with the Titans game in week 1, when they went for the extra point and he got it in. So kudos to Saquon. I'm not going to be a hater. I won't be burning his jersey even if I had it. But I think I was saying to Brian or somebody else earlier on, he'll be injured for the first meeting, and the second meeting is probably going to be in the third week of December, and he's going to be benched because the Eagles will be 11-3 or 12-3 or something like that. So I'm not overly worried about it. I wish him well, but I don't wish him well against the Giants. But
Brian, before we go to Column's first winner, you got some breaking news for us.
Yeah, it's one for you. I thought this is an interesting one. So Jonathan Owens, who moved over to the Packers last year, having played a number of years with the Texans, has signed a 2-year deal with the Bears. So he'll be head over heels. I think he's one of those guys that likes to do the head over heels celebration, which we saw with the Packers last year, but he's moved over, defensive back, 2-year deal, according to his agent. One really stellar season with the Packers, according to all the numbers being quoted by the various different outlets of NFL media in particular. And they're suggesting the Bears are going to be very pleased to take a player out of the division. Yeah. And I suppose addition by subtraction.
I have plenty of my doubts as regular viewers and listeners will know about Matt Eberflus. One thing Matt Eberflus knows, though, is defensive backs. The Bears are generally drafted well when it comes to the secondary, and they've made some good pickups there. So I'd be kind of cautiously optimistic that one will pan out, and so much the better if you get to wipe the eye of a divisional rival while you go about your business. Colm, give us your first winner, please.
So I'm going to be greedy, and I'm going to go for 2 here, because to me the positional group, mentioned it last night, but got to talk about guards. The fact that the jump in salary is quite something, and when you have David Tepper handing out contracts, it's altering things for everyone. Now the Rams probably set this ball in motion, but I think Howie got wind of it and got the Dickerson deal done, which at the time was like, wow, that's a lot. I mean, he's a good player, but that seems a lot. 4 hours later, it was like, oh yeah, that makes all sorts of sense, because Landon Dickerson was going to look at that and say, hang on, those guys are getting 20 million a year. Oh, whoa, what am I worth? So for me, the players getting big money is always a good thing. These are guys who put their bodies on the line day in, day out. So
but again, Colm, and I know you discussed that one last night as well, and it was a really interesting conversation. But you often talk about the response and then the response to the response. Like, this is when you got guys like Micah Parsons and you got guys like Myles Garrett in the league, when you got pass rushers who can be moved around anywhere by clever defensive coordinators, could come from anywhere, can hurt you in multiple ways. You need guys on the interior as well. It's not all about the tackles.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, Connor. That's where I think you're seeing a change, right? Look at earlier this year when he was fully healthy. The fact that Myles Garrett was lining up in front of the center and was doing crossovers as he toyed with their minds, and that's what they do now. It used to be you lined up your best pass rusher against the left tackle. I mean, I think when we look back on the history of football and you see where defenses, how defenses played the game up until probably, within the last 10 years. It was after the Legion of Boom were the last kind of defense that said, right, that's it. You play us on our terms. Ever since then, it's changed a little bit. So you can no longer just have a left tackle and a bunch of guys. And there'll be a response to that too. And we'll see how it'll go. And that'll be interesting. The one team I would mention who I think it's way too early, but and you're not going to appreciate this, Connor, but I like what the Green Bay Packers have done. They have a plan. They know how they're going about their business. They wanted to get younger at the running back position. If you look at the contract they gave to Jacobs, it was very similar to the last contract they gave to Aaron Jones. I think bringing in McKinney is a good signing. I think they know what they're about, and they are the team that probably is less influenced by outside noise than almost anyone else in the league. So I would have to say I've been impressed by the Packers thus far.
And you've kind of neatly anticipated my loser, which is the other side of that picture, which is rest of the NFC North. I think you're absolutely right. Like the Packers, I've grown to fear them for many different reasons over the years, obviously. But this version of that team is truly frightening to me because they're so young, because they seem to have so much upside, because of what they did in the playoffs. They should have knocked off the Niners. They should have gone to the championship game, and that would have been really interesting to see them go up against the Lions. I don't know how much more Detroit can squeeze out of what they have, and they've lost their offensive coordinator. Obviously, he was a key part of that whole picture. We don't know where the Vikings are going to be. And, even if a very best case scenario for the Bears is that you get Caleb Williams or whoever in and you have a CJ Stroud-like season, but how often does that happen? Realistically, I think everybody in the NFC North is going to be looking up at the Packers. They've made really good moves in free agency so far. They're well set up. We know whatever receivers that Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur are looking at are probably the best receivers in the draft below the first round. They seem to have been able to unearth these gems all over the place. I'd love to crack the Green Bay Packers safe code and get a look at who they're actually scouting and who's on their wide receiver board, because time and time again, they've winkled these guys out who've been and to be fair, and we talk about it all the time, it's not just who you draft and it's not just who you bring in, it's how you develop them. Like that's probably the secret sauce for the Packers. Like they're getting the very most out of what they have, and that's really as much as I can do to talk about Green Bay right now and the rest of the.
They better watch Xavier McKinney with the snowmobiles on bye week up there in the snow, because he's got a propensity to do some wild things on the bye week. So,
Brian, you're a loser.
Loser. I don't know if it's a loser, but it's a question mark. The Cowboys. I know I suggested last night Cowboys fans will, and probably the organization feel they're not far off being a team that can potentially be in the Super Bowl. And that's why last year they went out and made 2 trades in Cooks and Gilmore, and they've done very little so far over the course of the last 24 hours. And I know it's March, I know it's way too early, but it struck me today as a bit of a surprise that they didn't go in for Aaron Jones in particular. Having lost Zeke last year, Tony Pollard is gone. They didn't really have the strongest running game last year. They could have relied on a number of different players. I thought Aaron Jones was a good fit. He's from that local area. He always seems to play well when he goes into Dallas, and he obviously had a great college career down in Texas and stuff. So I thought that was a nice pickup for the Vikings today. In fairness, that was one of the ones that came out early today, that they've gone and done that deal, and they've done nothing since, again, the Cowboys. So it's a bit of a surprise to me. I'd say the loser, and you might not like this, Connor, it's a one player in particular, and it's probably Justin Fields, because last week there was various different conversations that there's a second round on the table, there's a third round, maybe a 2 and a 4, all the various different permutations. But what we've seen over the course of the last 24 hours, a lot of teams who need a backup are going and getting a backup. And where does that leave Fields? Because I felt Fields would look at the situation, and despite him clearly wanting to stay in Chicago and all the right things being said by Ryan Pauls, I think ultimately both parties probably felt he would go and get a place where he could be a starting quarterback somewhere else. And right now, I don't see that being going to materialize unless we see, as you said last night, a potential injury come training camp, which is always very likely. So the value is probably gone now, so it strikes me now as more of a second day trade or third day trade come late April in the draft.
Kieran, who's your loser?
Well, there's a couple. I just had a quick look at the free agents that are still available. Daniil Hunter's still out there. Tyron Smith, Stephon Gilmore.
I think did Smith end up going to the Chiefs? He was one I was kind of keeping an eye on myself.
That was a tight end. That's Irving Smith,
That's
tight
the other
end
one.
from the
Sorry, yeah,
Bengals.
never-
Yeah.
Hunter is actually talking to the Colts right now, according to Ian Rappaport.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And not to beat a dead horse, but Bryce Young didn't. I mean, he got the O-line help, but who's he going to throw the ball to? You know, what's going on in Carolina? I fear for him. Again, I was up close and personal with him in the press conference. He was absolutely rock bottom, absolutely despondent, disconsolate. I fear for him in the league. I just don't, unless he bulks up like crazy in the offseason, but it's not looking good for him. And the Panthers in general, despite all these, the B gap guys got the big bucks, but they're going to need a lot more than that in Carolina to do anything with poor Mr. Young. So, yeah, and it's notable. The Saints haven't done anything in free agency. Neither has Seattle. No one's talking about that. They've been very quiet.
Detroit too. Detroit's another one
Yeah,
been very quiet. Colm, have you got a loser for us? And please don't say it's wherever Drew Lock ended up.
I do, and maybe this one is going to be a little bit controversial. For me, it is the Atlanta Falcons. I think it's a massive overpay on Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk is fine, but I've said this on the show previously. I think the league will change utterly in 10 years. I think the idea of paying for average QB play is going to die out completely. Because what is your absolute best case scenario with Kirk Cousins? That you go to the wild card? Giddy up! No, sign me up for that for 45 million a year. Oh, I can't wait! Absolutely fantastic. Oh, I'll take all of that. Like, the reason the 49ers were able to do what they did with Brock Purdy is A, Kyle Shanahan's a genius. B, did the best weapons in the league, and C, they were paying him with magic beans. Like, the Falcons are paying cash money to Kirk Cousins. I don't see.
And as you say, Colm, and the best you can hope for with that, when pretty much everything else goes your way, is second place, because you still have to find a way past Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. And I just think that the Falcons were they were very close to the playoffs last year. If they had adequate QB play, they probably would have made it. And now they've paid 45 million to have adequate QB play. This is the problem. Owners get super impatient, and instead of, they were in a really good position to go up and make a move potentially to get a QB. But this has been going on. Like we talked about David Tepper. It's a little bit of the same situation. Like, they took a huge cap hit on Matty Ryan a few years ago. They then decided to roll the dice with Arthur Smith, and then Arthur Blank kind of got really unhappy, and Raheem Morris said it. I wouldn't be here if we had better QB play. It's a hell of a premium to pay for better QB play. I think the Vikings ultimately made the right decision in the long term for them, because what's the off ramp, right? With Kirk Cousins there, the Falcons, and realistically it's a 2-year deal, right? And then it's it's up to the team. But like, you're probably likely to win 8-9 games with Kirk Cousins, right? And what's your off ramp? Like, how do they? At what point do they have the ammunition to go up? Where's your succession plan? And the Vikings, with Kirk being injured, this is probably the best position they're in to go up and get or stay pat and take a young QB. But ultimately, to me, I think the league in 10 years is going to be the case of, you're going to pay the guys who give you a legitimate chance to absolutely be there. That is your Patrick Mahomes. That is your Josh Allen's. But I think it'll be much more of a carousel after that. The teams are not going to want to pay a premium for guys who can, Kirk Cousins is fine. but he's not a top 10 QB. He's probably somewhere in the region of the 14th best QB in the league. And I think paying the 14th best QB top kind of 10 money is silly.
Connor, Colin mentions top 10, but over the course of the last week, in particular since the Combine, it's been suggested that JJ McCarthy will go in the top 10. I know we're going to be covering the draft in the lead up in April, but like for me, JJ McCarthy looks like an idea 11, 12, 13, which is a running order of the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Raiders potentially. I would love to see what the Vikings would do if Kirk Cousins had to stay, because I'm convinced the strategy would have been still to go and get a quarterback. We'll never know now, and it probably pushes the buttons a little bit more for them to go and get that quarterback and try even move up a couple of slots to find that quarterback that they want for the future. But I don't think we're going to get away from them taking a quarterback whether Kirk Cousins remain in situ or not. I think that was probably very evident that would be the plan, but we'll never know now. But it probably heightens the pressure on them to try find this quarterback, or as we said earlier on the show, they run with Sam Darnold for 1 year and see how that plays out.
Yeah, indeed. And look, all of that really tees up nicely the upcoming draft, of course, before that. And it's been great to be back with you live, chopping up the free agency frenzy over the last couple of days. We have our live show, live event coming up in Buskers on the Ball in Temple Bar with Peter King on the 28th of March. Again, it's sold out, but we're really looking forward to welcoming you all to seeing you in real life and to getting Peter's take as he commences what you might call his retirement tour. And it's we feel very privileged to be able to welcome Peter and to help celebrate that milestone with them. Such a fantastic contributor to the world of NFL coverage over the years. And Colin, we mentioned that the Football Morning in America column, which was required reading. Is there any chance he'd just keep it going, just keep the column going? Just give us something from week to week, because. And I must ask him when we actually get him in the room how long it actually took to write that. I think he was up till 4 o'clock in the morning most weekends, his time churning that thing out, and just absolute quality every single week. So we can't wait for that. Can't wait to see you all in person. Plenty more content coming your way between now and then, though, on the Irish NFL Show. Keep an eye out for all of those interviews and podcasts, which will be dropping between now and then.